In Ottawa's winter air, a profound shift is underway. The city, blanketed in snow, feels the weight of history pressing in, as if the cold itself carries whispers of change. The capital's familiar routines are now tinged with a sense of urgency and anticipation, as leaders and citizens alike sense that the old certainties are slipping away. Canada, once seen as a deferential partner on the world stage, is now drawing a firm line in response to Trump's unilateral military intervention in Venezuela. The government's tone has shifted, measured but unmistakably resolute. No longer content to simply follow, Canada is stepping forward, determined to defend its principles and interests. On January 5, 2026, Parliament Hill is united and focused, not in fear, but in preparation. Lawmakers from all parties gather with a rare sense of purpose, setting aside partisan divides to confront a challenge that transcends politics. The mood is serious, but not panicked. There is a shared understanding that the stakes have never been higher. The era of taking Canadian security for granted is over. The government is investing in new technologies, increasing surveillance, and ensuring that the nation's defenses are ready for whatever may come. Canadians are being asked to reconsider what security means in a world where old alliances can no longer be assumed. The U.S., under Trump, is no longer a predictable guarantor of the international order Canada relies on. The relationship, once defined by trust and cooperation, is now marked by uncertainty and caution. Every decision from Washington is scrutinized, every statement weighed for its implications. This marks a turning point in U.S.-Canada relations. The assumption of shared values has been shattered. The diplomatic language is more guarded, the smiles more strained. Canada is learning to navigate a world where its closest ally may not always have its back. Ottawa sees the Venezuelan intervention as a direct challenge to sovereignty and international law. Protests erupt in the streets, and officials speak out forcefully, warning that the consequences of ignoring international norms will be felt far beyond Latin America. Canada is recalibrating its military, deepening alliances and integrating lessons from Ukraine. Training intensifies, strategies are revised, and new partnerships are forged with like-minded nations determined to uphold the rules-based order. The message to allies in Washington is clear. Canada will not be a passive bystander as the rules of international conduct are rewritten. Instead, it will be an active participant, shaping the future alongside those who share its values. This is a nation quietly preparing for an uncertain future, guided by calm resolve. In homes and offices, in the halls of power and on snowy streets, Canadians are steeling themselves for what lies ahead, determined to protect their democracy, their sovereignty, and their way of life, no matter how the world may change. The catalyst was a single press conference, a moment that would send shockwaves through international relations and redefine the balance of power in the Western Hemisphere. Trump's announcement of potential military intervention in Venezuela was more than just policy. It was a raw, unfiltered declaration of American dominance. This was not the language of partnership or mutual respect, but a clear assertion that the United States would act alone if necessary, prioritizing its own interests above all else. In that moment, Trump redefined the Donroe Doctrine for the 21st century. He made it clear that sovereignty in the Americas was no longer an inherent right, but something conditional, granted or denied based on alignment with U.S. interests. The message was unmistakable. American power would set the rules, and those who opposed them would face consequences. Unlike past interventions, which often sought international backing, or at least the appearance of multilateralism, this approach was proudly unilateral. American will was its own justification, and the administration made no apologies for acting alone. The United States now treats international institutions not as partners for building consensus, but as obstacles to be bypassed. The era of seeking broad coalitions or diplomatic cover seemed to be over, replaced by a new era of unapologetic American assertiveness. For Canada, this shift represents an existential challenge. It strikes at the heart of Canadian foreign policy, which is built on the principles of multilateralism, diplomacy, and a stable, rules-based world order. Suddenly, the very foundation of Canada's approach to global affairs is being tested. The realization is stark. This is not just political rhetoric or a passing moment. It is a clear, deliberate statement of intent from the world's most powerful nation, signaling a willingness to reshape the global order on its own terms. The Venezuela crisis has become much more than a regional dispute. It is now a test case for a new set of rules written and enforced by America itself. with little regard for international consensus. In this new reality, Canada must move beyond traditional diplomacy. It faces the urgent task of reassessing its own security, sovereignty, and alliances, preparing for a world where old certainties no longer apply. The stakes have never been higher. This is no longer just about Venezuela, it's about the future of the international order itself, and whether the world will be governed by rules or by the will of the strongest. Trump's Venezuela doctrine resonates deeply for Canada, echoing far beyond the headlines. It's not just about foreign policy in South America, it's about the ripple effects that reach all the way to Canada's own doorstep. Canada shares the world's longest undefended border with the United States, a border that has long symbolized peace, trust, and mutual respect between two nations. But today, Ottawa increasingly views this border as a potential vulnerability, not just a symbol of friendship. The changing tone in Washington has forced Canadian leaders to reconsider old assumptions about security and sovereignty. If the US claims the right to intervene anywhere in its hemisphere, where does that right end? Could it one day be used to justify interference in Canadian affairs under the guise of security or economic interests? This shift risks transforming Canada's relationship with the US from a partnership of equals into a hierarchy, where American interests dominate and Canadian concerns are sidelined. The normalization of such interventionist actions could legitimize future US involvement in issues critical to Canada, whether it's control over the Arctic, environmental regulations, or cross-border trade disputes. The Venezuela crisis is more than a distant conflict. It's a test case for the principles that underpin Canadian sovereignty. If Canada fails to resist this precedent, it could open the door to future challenges to its independence. That's why Canada's strong response is not just about Venezuela. It's a calculated defense of its long-term security, autonomy, and the values that define the nation. The border, once a quiet symbol of peace, now serves as a stark reminder to Ottawa of what's truly at stake: the preservation of sovereignty and the maintenance of peaceful coexistence with its powerful neighbor. By challenging the precedent of intervention, Canada stands up not only for itself, but for the principles of international law and mutual respect that guarantee its own security and future prosperity. Canada is recalibrating its defense policy, not in panic but with strategic intent. Modernization focuses on surveillance, Arctic security, and credible deterrence. Alliances with Europe and NATO are being deepened, moving beyond diplomatic niceties to foundational security partnerships. Joint military exercises and interoperability are now priorities. Canada is diversifying its security portfolio, learning from Ukraine's resilience and focusing on asymmetric, cyber, and information warfare. The aim: make Canada a more difficult target and a more capable ally. This is not about preparing for conflict with the US, but about deterrence through preparedness and partnership. Canada signals it is not a passive actor but a prepared nation ready to defend its rights. The message: Canada stands with allies to uphold the international order. For Ottawa, the US intervention in Venezuela is a global test case. If unchallenged, it risks normalizing unilateral power, undermining the sovereignty principle Canada champions. The logic could be replicated by other powers, eroding the rules-based order. Canada's response is focused on legitimacy and international law, rallying a coalition to isolate unilateral intervention. The Venezuela crisis is now a proxy battle for the future of global order. Canada stands for the principles that protect all sovereign nations. In contrast to Washington's rhetoric, Canada's response is calm and analytical. No fiery speeches, just a coordinated, whole-of-government approach. The focused de-escalation process and unwavering support for international law. Canada frames its opposition as a global principle, not a bilateral dispute. By coordinating with allies, Canada amplifies its voice and reinforces consensus. This multilateral approach is more effective than a loud protest. Canada's strength lies in credibility, legitimacy, and alliances, not military might. This is a quiet but powerful resistance, valuing long-term strategy over short-term emotion. Canada's response centers on a robust diplomatic counteroffensive, wielding multilateralism as its shield. Ottawa activates its international partnerships, building a coalition to uphold sovereignty and law. Canadian diplomats work tirelessly to forge a united front, especially with Europe. The strategy used global institutions to challenge the legitimacy of the intervention and isolate the US position. Even if a US veto is certain, the process highlights Washington's isolation. Canada champions multilateral bodies, working to repair and strengthen global stability. By turning the crisis into a global referendum, Canada leverages legitimacy and consensus against unilateral power. Ukraine's conflict has deeply influenced Ottawa's strategy. Canada is shifting toward agile, high-tech defense, learning from Ukraine's asymmetric warfare. Societal resilience and whole-of-society defense are now priorities. Canada strengthens cybersecurity, supply chain plans, and public awareness. Strategic communications are enhanced to counter disinformation and build coalitions. The lesson, unity, resolve, and smart partnerships can resist overwhelming power. Ukraine's example moves Canadian defense from abstract to concrete, inspiring resolve for a more uncertain world. Recent events have ended an era for Canada. The old trust in U.S. predictability is gone, replaced by a sober realism. This isn't anti-Americanism, but pragmatic adaptation. Canada now prioritizes self-reliance and diversified partnerships. Security is curated through domestic capability and global alliances. The Venezuela response is the first expression of this new doctrine. Canada will not be a passive observer. Calm, methodical, and multilateral, Canada's strategy defends sovereignty and the international order. The nation signals it is prepared, principled, and resolved to stand its ground.